If you're over 40, over 50, maybe even over 60, and you think you already missed your chance to build wealth, this may be the most important video you watch this year. Because the biggest lie in personal finance is not that investing is risky. It's not that you need a lot of money to start. It's not even that retirement is expensive. The biggest lie in personal finance is this: it's too late for you. And once someone believes that, they stop trying, they stop investing, they stop planning, they stop protecting their future. And from that moment on, they don't just lose time, they lose momentum. So let me tell you about Gloria. Gloria started investing at 53, not 23, not 33, not even 43, 53. And she started with almost nothing saved. Everyone told her the same thing people tell late starters every day: you missed the boat. The compound interest window is closed. The math doesn't work anymore. You should have started earlier. Now it's too late. That was 12 years ago. Today, Gloria is 65. Her portfolio has grown more than 850% from her original contributions. No, she's not a millionaire, and that's exactly the point. She doesn't need to be. She has enough to stop working when she wants, enough to help her grandkids, enough to sleep without that money panic waking her up at 3 a.m. And when people ask her secret, she doesn't talk about stock picks, timing the market, or some complicated strategy. She says one thing: I just started late, but I started. And that is what most people never do. If you want more breakdowns like this every week, hit subscribe to Naomi Capital right now, because this channel is about building real wealth without shame, without fluff, and without fantasy. Now let's destroy this lie properly. The reason it's too late is such a powerful lie is because it sounds smart. It sounds mathematical. And to be fair, the basic math does look brutal. If you invest $500 a month starting at 25, the result can be massive by retirement. If you start at 40, the final number is much lower. If you start at 50, lower still. So yes, starting early is better. Let's be honest about that. Starting at 25 is mathematically superior to starting at 55. But that's not the question most people should be asking. The real question is not, would it have been better if I started earlier? Of course it would have. The real question is starting now still worth it? And the answer is yes. Absolutely yes. Because the comparison people use is fake. Who is this perfect 25-year-old that finance people keep comparing you to? The one who invests every month without fail, never loses a job, never helps family, never has debt, never faces rent increases, never gets sick, never makes mistakes. That person mostly exists in personal finance examples, not in real life. In real life, most people in their 20s are trying to survive. They're paying rent, paying off debt, trying to build a career, trying not to drown. The person who often finally has a little margin to invest consistently is someone in their 40s or 50s. That matters because time is not the only variable. It's the biggest advantage when you start early, but it's not the only advantage. When you start later, you may have less time, but you often have more income, more stability, more discipline, more clarity, and more urgency. And urgency matters more than people realize. A 25-year-old might like the idea of retirement investing. A 55-year-old who's already felt financial panic, they don't just like the idea, they need it. That urgency can create consistency, and consistency is what actually builds wealth. There's also something else nobody mentions enough. The system itself recognizes late starters exist. That's why catch-up contributions exist. The rules literally allow people over a certain age to contribute more to retirement accounts than younger workers can. That should tell you something important. The world already knows people don't all start at 22 with perfect habits. People start late, people restart, people recover, and yes, the math still works. Not fantasy math, real math. Maybe you can't max out every account. Maybe you can't invest $30,000 a year. Fine. What if you just did something realistic? What if you contributed enough to get the full employer match? What if you added a few hundred a month into a retirement account? What if you stayed consistent for the next 10, 15, or 20 years instead of telling yourself the game is over? Will that make you a multimillionaire? Maybe not, Will it put you in a dramatically better position than doing nothing? Without question. And that's what changes lives, because most people don't destroy their financial future with one giant mistake. They destroy it by repeating one sentence for years. At this point, it doesn't matter anyway. That sentence is poison, because once you believe the outcome can improve, you give yourself permission to stop caring. You spend freely. You avoid the numbers. You numb yourself with convenience and short term pleasure. And then 5 more years disappear, then 10. And the truly tragic part is this: the thing that made it too late wasn't your age, it was waiting. So, no, the biggest mistake isn't starting late. The biggest mistake is using the fact that you started late as a reason to never start at all. That is the real trap, and it gets tighter every year. If it feels too late at 50, it'll feel even more too late at 55. If it feels too late at 55, it'll feel even worse at 60. That logic never helps you. It only buries you deeper. So you have to reject it completely. You are not competing with the imaginary version of yourself who started at 25. That person is fictional. The only real version of you is the one here right now, the one with whatever time, income, regret, and opportunity is still left. And the only question that matters is, what does this version of you do next? This is where the psychology becomes more important than the spreadsheet. Because when you start investing, even late, you change your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's bad with money. You stop seeing yourself as someone who failed. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's doomed. And you start seeing yourself as someone who builds, someone who invests, someone who plans, someone who protects their future. That identity shift is powerful, because once your money has a purpose, your behavior changes. You negotiate harder, you cut waste differently, you think twice before emotional spending. You stop treating every extra dollar like it has to disappear immediately. Wealth is not built only through math, it's built through identity. People act in line with who they believe they are, and someone who says, I'm too late, so why bother, will behave very differently from someone who says, I'm behind, but I'm building. That second person becomes dangerous in the best possible way. They get focused, they get intentional, they stop performing defeat and start performing discipline. And by the way, you're probably not as far behind as you think. That's another uncomfortable truth. Most people have very little saved. Not the people flexing online, not the finance influencers, real people. A huge number of households have little or no dedicated retirement savings at all. So when you start now, even modestly, you may already be doing more than the majority. Now, let me warn you about the biggest danger for late starters: desperation. Once people realize they're behind, they want to catch up fast. That's when they get baited into bad decisions: crypto moonshots, options, penny stocks, hot tips, some magical double your money plan. That is exactly how people make a bad situation worse. Late starters do not need lottery tickets, they need reliable growth. You do not fix a late start with more chaos. You fix it with more consistency. Boring works, diversified investing works, automatic contributions work, patience works. And older investors often have an advantage younger ones don't: perspective. They've lived through crashes, recessions, recoveries, fear cycles. They've seen panic come and go. That experience matters, because one of the biggest destroyers of long term returns isn't lack of opportunity, it's panic. Selling low, freezing up, making emotional moves at the worst possible moment. Older investors often know themselves better. They know their risk tolerance better. They know what fear feels like. And that self awareness can lead to better decisions. If this is hitting home, hit like and make sure you're subscribed, because this channel is for people who want real strategy, not financial entertainment. Now, let's talk about the emotional side. Because when people say it's too late for me, what they often really mean is, I feel ashamed. Ashamed they didn't start sooner, ashamed they made mistakes, ashamed they avoided it too long, ashamed they spent money they should have saved. But shame is a sunk cost. You do not repair old mistakes by making new ones. You do not fix delay by delaying longer. And you do not build a future by obeying regret. The only way out is forward, which means at some point you have to give yourself permission to begin. Not when everything is perfect, not when the market feels safe, not next year, now. Because here's the brutal truth: you're going to be older anyway. You're going to be 60 or 65 or 70. Time will pass whether you invest or not. The only question is whether that future version of you has something or nothing. Something means options. Something means breathing room. Something means less panic. Something means dignity. Something means not feeling trapped in your final decades. You may not become a millionaire. You may not retire early, but you can become someone who has a cushion instead of desperation. And that matters more than most people realize. So here's what I want you to do after this video. First, run the numbers, not fantasy numbers, real numbers. What could you actually invest consistently? Second, automate it tomorrow, even if it's small. Third, get every employer match available to you. Fourth, learn which retirement accounts make sense for your situation. And fifth, tell someone, make it real. Say it out loud. I'm starting now. That sentence has power. Gloria said it. And years later, her life looked completely different. Not because she found a secret, because she stopped obeying a lie. The people who miss out on wealth are not always the ones who start late. They're the ones who never start at all. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So if you're waiting for permission, this is it. Start now, small if necessary, messy if necessary, late if necessary, but start. And if you want more videos that help you build wealth with clarity, strategy, and zero shame, hit subscribe to Naomi Capital right now and turn on notifications. New breakdowns every week. And in the comments, tell me this: what age are you starting or restarting from? I read every single one. See you in the next video.